Hello and welcome to The Ticket, the podcast where we explore the cutting edge of customer service and support. In today's episode, we're diving into the evolving landscape of customer service, particularly how AI is reshaping customer journeys and service operations. Our VP of Customer Support at Intercom, Declan Ivory, sits down for a conversation with Nick Clark, a partner at Boston Consulting Group, who has spent his career transforming customer service for organizations around the world. Nick has helped over 180 companies reinvent their customer service strategies with a focus on AI, omni-channel support, and agile ways of working. Today, they'll explore how generative AI and new operating models are transforming the customer service experience and what it means for the future of the industry. Over to Declan.
Nick, I'm going to jump right in if that's okay. I know you are passionate about this subject, and I know we're going to hopefully get through some really engaging and interesting conversation for the next while. How do you envisage generative AI reshaping customer service organizations?
Well, I think it's already starting to reshape customer service organizations. So some of it I can describe about just what's happening now, but I think, there's a lot more to come in the future. I think my main takeaway so far, which might be a bit counterintuitive, is that so far generative AI is bringing technology and people closer together. So for the first time, because of the truly natural language interface that generative AI offers, we're seeing a lot more companies offering pretty seamless interactions between a customer being supported by a bot to a customer being supported by a human agent who themselves is being supported by a bot. And then a lot of the support roles as well. So things like quality assurance, training, those sorts of things are also being handled by a combination of a bot and a human being. And so I think one of the most interesting things I've seen so far is that breakdown of that distinction between digital and self-service and the human support on the other side.
I really love that perspective of generative AI bringing kind of the humans and technology closer together. And as we think about developing an operating model for this kind of new world, what are the key elements of that model that need to change for businesses to really fully realize AI's potential in delivering whatever they're aspiring to, which is faster, more proactive customer service?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is the starting point is to think about what are the capabilities that the AI is really good at doing. So that's things like knowledge retrieval, doing repeatable admin tasks, finding out information on behalf of agents, as well as also actually guiding around personalization and things like that. So that's what the bots are really good at doing. What the human beings are really good at doing is, building kind of personal connections with customers, building those longer term relationships. And also what we see is what I would describe as at the moment kind of higher order problem solving. So that's things like, rather than thinking about, how do I solve the problem at hand, which might be what the bot is very good at doing, getting information from the knowledge base. What we're seeing now is the human agents are able to spend more of their time thinking, well, how do I grow this customer? Like, how do I get them to get more out of the products that we offer? Reduce, maybe, fix a root cause of a problem that this customer's had for a long period of time. So that's really where that kind of human ingenuity comes in. I think in terms of what that means in terms of a change to an operating model is the way I really think about it is service and support organizations are going from being primarily run organizations, where you're really focused on running the operation, delivering the service in real time. They're moving from run operations to run plus change operations. So the capabilities that people need in the future and that leaders need as well is the ability to continuously improve the AI, continuously monitor the performance of it, improve customer journeys over time, those sorts of things. So it becomes a bit more of a kind of product management mindset, even within the context of a service delivery operation.
I really love that perspective of, that kind of change in focus and just being kind of a run focus. And, the way you've kind of articulated it is almost like a product mindset. It's really interesting. You've talked a little bit already around how some of the existing roles can change in a support organization because of generative AI. But what new roles and responsibilities will emerge for customer service teams as AI continues to evolve?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that we're seeing already that are evolving. So there's some capabilities which used to exist, which now have become really important, like stuff like knowledge management. So in the past, I don't know, knowledge management was obviously an important part of customer support, but because the knowledge base is being read by a human agent, and the human agent can sort of, determine. I've been into many contact centers, and you sit next to the agents. They say, "Oh yeah, this is what it says on the knowledge base." But this is what we really do. We know to listen to point. We read points 2, 5, and 6 because they're correct. The other ones we just kind of ignore. So human beings know that and they kind of adapt to it. Whereas, of course, knowledge bases for AI to consume, like we don't really have that luxury. We need to make sure that they're properly accurate, they're properly indexed, but formatted in the right way. Those sorts of things. So I think very quickly we're seeing that kind of professionalization of knowledge management within the customer support organization, and then interestingly, that's then starting to spread into broader enterprise knowledge management and thinking about how you can use this AI that starts in the customer support world actually to support the enterprise to work more effectively end to end. So that's one. I think the other is this sort of, again, this kind of blurring of the technology and the human is the emergence of a function which we're seeing called something like AI ops. So this is the teams of people that are actually running the models and running the AI capabilities within the organization. And that's quite that's not just about building capability. It's also about, continuously monitoring the performance of the LLMs that you're using, continuously monitoring for, data security, information security, continuously monitoring for cost, because, some of these consumption-based LLMs, they're not, they cost money as you're using them. And that's a very, it's like a frontline operational role. You're having a direct impact on customer experience through the real-time decisions that you're making there. But it's also a very technical role. Like it requires quite deep technical understanding. And that's quite different perhaps to, classic operational management roles within a customer support organization.
Yeah, I love that perspective of kind of AI ops and a whole new world of how you think about managing that AI layer. Like at one level, we position it is another teammate, it's another support rep, but a support rep with some very specific needs to make it optimized.
Yeah, I like that idea. Obviously, it works in a different way, has different requirements. But I think thinking about it as you need to be able to manage the AI and you need leadership for the AI itself that's a really interesting metaphor there to explore. Yeah,
Absolutely. Nick, you've had a very diverse career in customer service, starting on the phones, now working at BCG. Like, what changes do you see in the career paths available to today's customer service professionals, specifically with the rise of AI and automation?
yeah. I mean, I think something that has always attracted me to customer service, it's the reason I really like working in this industry, is a lot of people that you meet, a lot of the leaders that you meet started out in a junior role and rose all the way to the top. And you met so many brilliant leaders who've kind of, started their careers on the phones or, handling trouble tickets. And that's, I think, because frontline roles give you this really good grounding to understand what do customers really value, what really makes customers upset, because it's so easy to, from 10,000 feet up to make assumptions about that and make generalizations. But often some of those details can be really important. But, as we've kind of discussed already, as the world is getting more complex, the world of customer support is getting more complex. So I do think what we're seeing increasingly is there's a bit of a need for balance there. So often we need to have a portfolio of leaders within a customer service organization that have that on the ground experience, but also mixed with people with perhaps more, deeper kind of technical domain expertise. What I've started to see a bit more is, I guess you could call them boomerang careers. So it's people who still started out and have, maybe, a few management roles within customer support organizations, but maybe they branched out, done something else, maybe worked in IT or digital or marketing or even finance, and then, using those skills to then return to more senior positions in customer service. So I think if I was sort of starting my career again, or advice to people who are starting their careers today, I think that would be it, is, like, take the value of the unique value of having that frontline customer service experience, augment that with some technical knowledge or professional knowledge from elsewhere in organizations, and then bring that back. And then you're a kind of, you're an unstoppable force.
I love that. I mean, I think, particularly as you outlined earlier, with new roles and responsibilities emerging, like the opportunity for people to have a longer career in customer service, I think is absolutely on the cards. And certainly that concept also of kind of boomerang people coming back into customer service because, the skills that they've acquired outside are now highly valued within the customer service role. That's a really, really interesting perspective. So how can companies better support and professionalize customer service roles? What steps can they take to make these career paths more obvious and appealing to employees, who are currently going to enter this field over the next while?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one we're actually working with I'm working with a financial services company on those questions at the moment. We're doing a lot of primary research into career pathing, into people's career aspirations, those sorts of things. Now, unfortunately, I can't share all of that. Now it's still work in progress. But just to give you a few of the highlights, I think there's three kind of big trends that we're starting to see. One is, a move towards more kind of expert career paths. And so what's happening here is the ability for people to progress and to be recognized, not just, for working their way up the pyramid and becoming managers, but by being experts and domain experts in particular areas. And that might be in an area where customers need support, or it might be some of those more technical AI areas that I was describing earlier. And I just want to dwell on that for one bit longer, because it's kind of, again, a bit counterintuitive, because what we're also seeing within customer support organizations is, generally speaking, a move towards more generalization. So people being fewer sort of very siloed specialist roles, more people that can serve customers across a broad range of topics. But I think what's interesting is what comes with that is, although if the broad population of support engineers or agents are getting more multi-skilled, there's still a role for like key areas where like very specific expertise comes into play. Maybe for, second line, or much more technical, or question if you're in financial services, like complex questions about particular products. And what we're seeing emerge there is this idea of a kind of what we call a T-shaped skill set. And what I mean by that is a T-shape means you're kind of broad. You're able to answer kind of any question if a customer asks. That's because you're supported by the AI to give great training, great knowledge, those sorts of things. But you still have that specialism in a particular area. And that's where we can start to get smart around routing of customer interactions to the right place, because then you can take advantage of that deeper skill, that expert career path. Sorry, I've talked a lot for that one. That was just number one. 2 and 3, we're also seeing, more collaboration. So similar to that is, having front office and back office teams, instead of them working in silos, employees collaborating more in kind of multi-skilled pods, or sometimes companies call them swarms, where, teams kind of come together virtually to solve issues. And that's really in response to the fact that, as more simple customer interactions get digitized and automated, this is what remains is more complex, and people tend to need to collaborate more to get those issues solved. So that collaboration is driving, it's a kind of intrinsic motivator as well to want to come and work. You're working with a team to help customers. You're not just working on your own. The final change we're seeing is around reducing the admin burden for managers. So, again, through automation, less time spent on those kind of, annoying tasks like adjusting schedules, producing reports, monitoring calls, like all those sorts of things. Those become largely automated. And instead, what we're seeing is managers are spending more time on motivating, coaching, and developing their teams. I think it's another good example of how, the human and the tech side is working in conjunction with each other.
I love those kind of three focus areas. T-shaped one is particularly interesting because I hadn't really thought about it quite in that way. But basically, you're saying that AI enables people to be broad, like the top of the T, but you still want them to have that kind of very deep technical skill in a particular aspect of your product and service, because to a large extent, that's the value add that they bring to kind of complement an AI agent and really handle the more complex, nuance questions or queries that customers have. So yeah, I like the T-shape. I like collaboration and enabling, leadership to be more motivational and provide more coaching for the team. Actually makes a lot of sense. And AI enabling all that across the board. Clearly, complexity is one of the biggest challenges in customer service today, and we've touched on it a little bit as we talked about the evolving roles. But how can companies fight back against complexity, and how might AI tools play a role in simplifying both internal processes and ultimately the customer experience?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked this question. It's one of my sort of pet topics that I really like to talk about, because I think, certainly from what I've seen, a lot of the companies I've worked with, is many companies overestimate their customers' tolerance for complexity. and that drives poor customer satisfaction. And it was like one very extreme example, probably the most extreme. I worked with a company once who was showing me we're working through their kind of online customer service portal. And there was one process in particular, and they said, this is a process, we've digitized it, it's online. And we had a look at it, and what you had to do was you had to download a PDF file, print it out, fill it in by hand, then scan it in, and then there was a kind of online submission. And, unsurprisingly, as I'm sure you could imagine, Declan, like the customer take up for that option was pretty low. Like, it's not really digital, it's very high friction. So I think, often that, unfortunately, sometimes that's that sort of stuff, and, not everything's that extreme, but those kind of things do get overlooked. And I think customers really don't like complexity. It really it reduces trust very quickly, and it causes customers to want to seek help and support, because they don't understand, they don't necessarily understand why things are as complex as they should be. And it's actually kind of the same inside contact centers, where the customer service reps themselves, if you're handling 40 to 50 calls or tickets every day, you don't want to have to navigate through dozens of different screens or interpret lots of different complex rules to find the right answer. It's quite, so that creates a lot of stress for people as well. And I think that's another area that often, isn't always quantified and valued. So there's lots of ways to tackle that. And a lot of it happens upstream. It's around the simplicity of the products or the digital offerings that before a customer gets into customer support. But I do think that generative AI can, if deployed in the right way, it does reduce complexity. So, for example, instead of having to search through a complex user interface or a load of PDF manuals to get to an answer, a customer or a customer service rep, they can ask that question in plain language, or even the tool can even listen in on a call or monitor a chat or an email and provide a targeted answer. And that targeted answer means you don't have to look at so much. You just get the answer. And, we've deployed this in many cases now. See, pretty consistently, the time, reduces resolution time by between 15 and 30%, depending on the context. So, very, very well established way to simplify things there now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people view introducing AI as complicating things, but I think you're outlining a role where it really kind of can simplify things. But it is important also that you think very intentionally about how you implement AI tools into your kind of process stack, for want of a better way of describing it. And so,
from our conversations before, that's something that you've experienced in your own support organization, right? You're starting to see the benefits of that.
oh, absolutely. We have what we call an AI first approach around, how we deliver customer service. But one key thing that we focus on, and this is, where I was going when I was saying you need to be very intentional. Like we have this new role in our organizational conversation design, where we really look at what does it feel like from a customer perspective as it has to navigate, our support proposition, particularly when you introduce AI and automation into that kind of journey. And, that really helps you to simplify the ultimate customer experience when you actually, have someone whose role is actually to road test. What does it actually feel like to be a customer? Where are the friction points? How can we remove them? How can we make this actually a much better experience for the customer, and ultimately make it more efficient for us to deliver the support as well? So it's really, when we go back to new roles in this industry, conversation design is a really, really critical one, particularly in the context of trying to simplify, that customer journey.
Yeah, I love that, because conversational design is something that has been around for a little while, particularly around chatbots themselves. But, historically very, very focused purely on the chatbot conversation design. It sounds like what you're describing there that's across the whole customer experience. So what is the conversation like with the bot, with the human, with the follow-up, email that they get or whatever? Yeah, I think that's exactly the kind of thing that we think about in terms of new capabilities that are needed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like looking at end-to-end customer experience is really what makes the difference. Like with AI's potential to reduce complexity, sometimes by feeding dynamic information to customer service agents, how can businesses balance AI-driven simplicity with the need for continuous human oversight and adaptation to customer needs and expectations?
Well, I talked earlier about these kind of AI ops capability, and that's really where we're seeing, the types of competencies that are needed in order to be able to make this effectively. So, for example, to monitor and continuously adapt and improve AI tools, to improve, the accuracy, the safety and security, those kinds of things. something that we're starting to see is using generative AI to help with that as well. So it's sort of bots that are there to help manage bots. And that's what helps this kind of balance of human oversight, but also the adaptation. So for example, when we've deployed generative AI bots that are going to be, particularly ones that are going to be customer facing, we've also built generative AI test bots that sends thousands and thousands of prompts to a chatbot, for example, and they're testing for any vulnerabilities. So, can we get it to all sorts of things, to give away personal information that it shouldn't do, to give away any information about its source code, or just to, to respond inappropriately to a question or answer about a topic that it's not supposed to. So all of those sorts of things. And it's only really by automating that in very high volumes through that kind of brute force approach that you can really have a reasonable confidence that that's going to work for you.
I love that idea of AI testing the AI. It's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll see more of that. I think we'll see more, and I think this. Well, I mean, we could talk for hours about the possibilities around changes to business models and ways that customers can interact with AI. But I think certainly AI more broadly representing customers we're going to see. So yeah, as I say, there's sort of test bots. The other thing we're starting to see is for training is new agents coming on board, or even for recruiting, and having a conversation with a generative AI customer who can ask all kinds of awkward questions, but really adapt and respond to what the agent is saying, and then provide an assessment, a recommended assessment off the back of that, which is of course reviewed by a human being. Where I think this might go is the idea around, AI customers as well. So the idea that as a customer, you might have an AI bot in your phone, which does all the work for you. It rings up customer support. It sends the email to customer support, those sorts of things. So I think one thing we need to watch for in future is, we don't want to have just, bots interacting with bots in what might actually be quite an inefficient way. But it's doing that because of the to fill in the gaps where, a simple self-service solution might actually have been, a better answer at the start.
Absolutely. I think it's a good point. Like sometimes we get very focused on, well, AI will answer the question. But as a support leader, I'm kind of asking myself, why did the customer have to ask the question in the first place? Can I get rid of that need up front? So I think we shouldn't lose sight that ultimately, you're trying to avoid your customer having to contact you, for something that they should be able to self-serve and handle themselves. So yeah, really good point. And the other area I think where AI can help as well, like quality assurance, I think, yes, testing it up front is critical, but when it's in operation, like to your AI ops point, like how are you understanding the quality assurance of AI versus the quality assurance of your human support team, for example? You've really got to think about what is that experience for customers, and being able to objectively assess it as well, as it's kind of running in your operation.
Yeah, I'd say it's the human and the tech coming together more closely again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, we're in the kind of the process of building QA scorecards for Finn, which is our kind of AI agent, and making sure that we're applying the right level of QA assurance to every Finn interaction, just as we do to human interaction. And then we want to kind of move it on and actually look at how do we QA the customer experience from end to end. It's not just about QAing the Finn interaction or the human interaction, but having a QA lens across the entire customer experience. And when we talk about kind of AI bots, talking to AI bots, like the doom loop is a growing concern in customer service, where customers get stuck in self-service tools like IVRs or chatbots, and it's something you've written about. So what steps can businesses take to ensure that AI-powered tools actually enhance the customer journey rather than trapping customers in these kind of loops of doom?
Yeah, I mean, this to me is the great unlock of getting AI right is, to think like a customer and design. It seems so obvious, but design journeys that are like customers. And, I think that it's not all, that doesn't happen automatically. I think first there's a kind of mindset change that's needed. And actually I'm as guilty of this as many people are. And in fact, recently I got brought up on it by a head of customer service that I was working with. And she said, look, we don't use words like, I was using a word like containment or deflection. And she said, we don't use those words here. Stop using those words. If you're a customer, you don't want to be contained. You want to be deflected. Like what does that even feel like? And, if a customer heard, companies using those words, I don't think they would score them very highly on this sort of NPS survey or those sorts of things. So, it sounds small, but I think the starting point is, we should think the objective here is things like getting things resolved, guiding customers, helping customers, assisting customers, not containing them or deflecting them. It's a small thing, but I think it's important. And I think then having done that, it's then about understanding that really, within customer service, you have to build processes that cater to exceptions. That doesn't mean you've got to automate every single exception that exists, but it means you do need to recognize that exceptions happen and that actually, I have seen across my career fairly consistently across industries, we do the analysis and we find that about 10% of the exceptional cases in the contact center drive about 50% of the cost, 40 to 50% of the cost. But up to 80% of the customer dissatisfaction. So, 80% of the really dissatisfied customers, they come from that group, from that 10%. And, of course, we need to build tools that cater to the 90% that are having an okay time and non-exceptional requests. But it's really about, building in off-ramps. So it's recognizing that exceptions happen, thinking like smartly about how can we spot those exceptions early on or identify that what a customer is in a situation which isn't standard, and then applying a different treatment. So whether that's, getting them through to a human agent more quickly, getting them through to, actually having a different policy on how to handle this customer, running a different process, those sorts of things. And that kind of logic is really the core of how you escape the doom loops. So for example, you could have a rule where, if a customer's been through an IVR and been through the same loop on an IVR more than twice, maybe even more than once in the same day, then you just put them straight through to somebody to speak, or put them through to a specialist. You don't make them go through it again. What's interesting, I think sometimes I work with companies and they sort of worry that by building too many of these off ramps, the customers will use them excessively instead of self-serving. The classic people press 0 or hash on the or star on the IVR to get through to a human being, and of course it does happen. Partly that is another guidance that we probably need to get some better self-service to start with so that people aren't doing that. But I think, to be fair, customers have been trained by having bad experiences in the past. So it is important to encourage customers to give it a try. I think with AI, another benefit is we don't have to place those off-ramps in plain sight. So you don't have to say straight up, press 0 to speak to an agent. You can have a triage conversation with the customer through an AI bot, and then present them with the options based on their situation. And that enables you to, be a bit more curated about how you present those off ramps, but at the same time, again, avoiding the actual, customers getting stuck in the doom loop.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the whole benefit of kind of personalization, where you understand exactly where the customer is. You can make those decisions almost in real time using an AI agent, around that off ramp. You don't have to be as deterministic as you might have had to be in the past, which is really an interesting and kind of perspective, and kind of brings me on a little bit to the next question, Nick, because I think we all acknowledge that the advances in generative AI over the last couple of years have really opened up a whole new world of possibilities around how you transform customer service and ultimately the customer experience. But many people are claiming we're only kind of at the, we're on the cusp of, some even more fundamental transformation. And looking ahead, like, how do you see the future of customer service evolving over the next 5 years, particularly with, much tighter integration of AI into the customer experience?
Yeah, I'll probably follow on from that last question, almost to describe the opposite, because I think the big picture is over that period of time, for many businesses, customer service is going to become a value driver. And rather than just being, often, some organizations really seen as a cost driver. And that's because, the AI enables the service experience to be much more closely integrated with the product experience. So if you think about it, depending on what kind of products you offer, maybe they're digital products, maybe they're physical products, maybe they're just services. But if we can use data and AI to predict that a customer needs help and provide proactive service before the customer reaches out, that's a wonderful experience, right? That doesn't happen that often. So it's a really good opportunity to differentiate. And so, then applying that personalization throughout the customer journey. So, you had that proactive reach out, and then, a week later you had the same issue and you speak to somebody or you speak to a bot, and it knows that that's what happened a week ago. And it doesn't just follow the standard process. It does something different. So, that very kind of personalized flow. And I think we'll see, the value of that is not measured purely by, efficiency or productivity. The value is, how do customers engage with you as a company, as a brand? Like, how do they start to trust you more? Do they start to recommend you more? They buy more products from you. Maybe they speak to your customer service representatives to buy more stuff rather than just, request help with things. And I think, a lot of the companies we work with, that's how they're starting to describe their vision for service. And it's a kind of virtuous circle, because once you've got that vision, obviously the value, like the cash value of doing that, is much greater as well. So it helps to drive more of that investment in the technology that's going to help you to get there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that switch from cost center to value center is actually happening right here, right now. And I think, there's much more to come as we think about, how AI is evolving.
Indeed, yeah. And I think, some of the more progressive organizations I work with now, they sort of they really are seeing customer service as an extension of either their digital channel or of marketing or of a bit of both. But it's really, this is the place where they as a company have large scale human to human customer conversations. And it's all about reinforcing your brand and the value of your brand. That's part of the experience. It's not this kind of separate thing that sits to the side that's just there to solve problems.
Absolutely. And I think what's happening, very clearly on the ground as well, the lines between what's traditionally been called customer service and customer success are blurring quite a bit. And with a move to customer service being more value adding, you can actually take on tasks and activities that traditionally would have fallen under the customer success umbrella. But now you can do it at scale across all those touch points that you have with customers, as you mentioned, whether it's through digital channels, whether it's sales-led customers, whether it's self-serve customers. Like, there's a lot you can do at scale now that is more aligned with kind of traditional success motions.
Yeah, that's interesting. And again, I think, it's the putting the customer hat on. But particularly, customer success, that's kind of a bigger thing in B2B than B2C. But I think in a B2B world, even more, customers don't think, oh, am I speaking to sales? Am I speaking to customer support? Am I speaking to customer success? They just, hey, I just want this I just want this thing to help me do my business better and achieve the outcomes that I need. And I want the company to organize around me, not the other way around. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really good point. Like, when you expose your customer organization structure or hierarchy to your customers, it's not a good thing. Nick, any final words before we kind of wrap up? Again, what would your advice be to people who are embarking on this kind of AI first or AI driven journey?
Yeah, just to be annoying, I would say, don't make it an AI first or AI driven journey. Make it a value first journey, and think about the combination of the people, the process, the tech platforms, and the AI use cases. And how all that's going to work together to achieve the vision of what you're going to get to. One little stat we always love to throw in at BCG is, our experience of doing these transformations now, about 10% of the effort is designing and building the AI use cases. About another 20% of the effort is building the underlying tech and data architecture or infrastructure that enables those to happen. So that, the data pipelines for the AI to use, for example, and the cloud services. And the remaining 70% is the people and process and operational transformation to actually get it to work and to get to the value. And that's, for many companies, that really is where most of the effort needs to be.
Excellent. I love that kind of 10-20-70 split. And I couldn't agree more. Like that, focus on change management, I think, is really critical to success in this area. And yeah, start with a value driven lens. Absolutely makes a lot of sense. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today on The Ticket. We really appreciate the insights that you've brought from your vast experience in customer service.
Thank you. It was really lovely to speak to you. Thanks.
Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at intercom.com/blog/newsletter to stay updated with the latest trends in customer service and support. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time on The Ticket.